Eamon Khan here for Seconds Out. Pleasure to be joined once again by Hall of Fame boxing writer Thomas Hauser over in the States. Thomas, how's life treating you?
Well, look, it's a rough time for me and a lot of people because of the political situation.
Mm.
It is very, very troubling. I'm not sure how we come out of it. It makes all of boxing's problems seem irrelevant by comparison, but we're here to discuss boxing, not politics. So let's go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully boxing is some form of escape. And this was, or at least last night was billed as one of the greatest boxing cards in recent, well, long memory. You've been in boxing a lot longer than I have. Did this live up to the bill of some of the great fight cards of the past?
Well, okay, let's start with the very silly hype. This was widely trumpeted as the greatest boxing card of all time. And obviously, the zone commentators were instructed to keep repeating that phrase, and it wasn't. It was a very, very good card. But let's start with the fact that and also I was at the main event, the Beterbiev Bivol was an exceptionally good fight, but it wasn't a fight on the magnitude of something like Leonard Hearns won or Leonard Hagler or a half dozen Muhammad Ali fights. So to say this was the greatest boxing card of all time was silly. Having said that, there were some very, very good fights on the card, and it was worth watching.
Getting straight to the main event in the rematch, it was Bivol who got the nod on the judges' scorecards. Was he the right man to win last night?
I watched it pretty closely. Obviously, I was watching it on a screen rather than there live. I had it even. I thought it was a draw, so I can't complain with the score going 1 point in Dmitri's favor. It was much faster paced than the first fight. I thought it was more dramatic. There were some very good ebbs and flows. I felt that Dmitry won the early rounds, then Beterbiev took control, and I really thought that okay, he has command of the fight now. He'll win, but then he started to tire, which is not unusual for a 40-year-old man in a fight like that. Bivol came on, and as I said, I had it even, but I can't quarrel with 1 point either way.
Does that then lend itself to a trilogy later on in the year? You feel it seems like Beterbiev said post-fight he'd kind of honored his side of things by having the rematch, and he's expecting Bivol to do the same. Bivol in the post-fight press conference mentioned he's open for every option, whether it be Beterbiev trilogy, Canelo, Benavidez, maybe even a move up to cruiserweight. But does the trilogy with Beterbiev seem like the most logical step?
Certainly, obviously, Turkey Al Sheikh has to want it. If he wants it and decides to fund it, it will happen. And off the first two fights, particularly the second one, which I felt was exceptionally good, a third fight is warranted. Although, neither man is getting any younger, but at this point, that's more of a factor for Beterbiev or Beterbiev. I'm never quite sure how to pronounce it. And I mean no disrespect with my pronunciation or mispronunciation.
Moving on to the co-main or chief support, at least, it was supposed to be Daniel Dubois defending his IBF heavyweight title against Joe Parker. That wasn't to be as Daniel Dubois pulled out due to illness, and in stepped Martin Bakole on 2 days' notice. Martin, for a lot of people in the wake of it, were saying that this was a better fight and felt that Martin could have pulled off the upset. Wasn't to be. Joe Parker got the knockout victory in the second round. Seemed like that was the way the fight was going to go. But did you feel that Martin could have maybe made the or got the upset victory?
No, that fight was an embarrassment.
Mm.
Dubois Parker would have been a very good fight. If you gave Bakole 6 weeks to prepare for Joseph Parker, that would have been a very good fight. But the man came in at least 315 pounds, could have been more, but he was grossly out of shape. I mean, he got off a plane from Africa at 2 o'clock in the morning. I mean, when I get off a transatlantic flight, I can hardly keep my eyes open. I can hardly talk. And you're asking the man to go out and fight Joseph Parker. That was silly. And obviously his corner knew it because the first time he got knocked down, they jumped up on the ring apron and stopped it. So no, that fight shouldn't have happened. I know Martin got paid very well, which is why he did it. It's a loss on his record. It's unfortunate. That fight did the fans no favors.
The UFC, in their ascendancy towards the mainstream spotlight, have made the decision to, in big fights, big occasions, such as what you could attribute to this past weekend, they have someone in standby who makes weight in the possibility that someone pulls out of a fight at the main event or chief support like this. Do you think that might be an innovation or a move to be made in future cards where there's a lot of jeopardy and a lot of spotlight on a card like last night's?
Sure, although the card could have gone ahead without the Joseph Parker match on it, and it was still a very good, impressive card. You had a similar problem with the Shakur Stevenson fight,
Yeah,
where Floyd Schofield fell out, and at the last minute they put Josh Padley, is that his name?
that's right.
Yeah, who clearly was ill-equipped. And look, that's the typical Shakur Stevenson opponent is somebody who's slow and can't punch, and Padley certainly fit that description. He was a 30-1 underdog and looked like it. That's no knock on Josh. He fought as well as he could, and he beat Mark Chamberlain in his last fight, which is how he got this one. But that was another fight that we all could have been spared. Fights like that don't help boxing.
On Dubois Parker for the moment, or at least Joe Parker's victory, Joe welcomed all challengers, said he wanted Alexander Usyk, but it seems to be at least the lay of the land right now that Dubois might go into the rematch with Alexander Usyk. So where does that leave Joe Parker, do you feel?
Joe Parker will get another heavyweight fight. I don't know who it's going to be. There are plenty of heavyweights out there. I mean, Joseph Parker against Kabayel would be an interesting fight. That's one you could look at for starters.
Do you have an appetite to see the rematch between Usyk versus Dubois, seeing as Alexander Usyk has said, look, I've got one, maybe two fights at a push left in me?
Sure. I mean, who else is he going to fight? He beat Joshua twice. He beat Fury twice. Dubois has a belt. To me, the first fight was not controversial. I thought it was a low blow that felled Usyk. He got time to recover, and then he handled Dubois fairly easily. Dubois seems to be a more confident fighter now, so I wouldn't mind seeing that fight again.
Now, there was some controversy on the card in the form of Hamzah Sheeraz and Carlos Adames for the WBC middleweight title, which saw the fight end in a draw. Lots of fallout from this fight. Hamzah Sheeraz has made no excuses in terms of his hand being a factor in the fight, which I believe Frank Warren had revealed that it was broken, which maybe meant that the fight went the way it did. But those scorecards, do you feel the same way that a lot of people do in that they didn't reflect the way the fight went?
I actually scored that fight a draw,
Okay.
and I was scoring it off a TV monitor. I thought it was even. The one judge had, what was it, 119 or 118 to 112 or 111, whatever was it, 118, 112? Was that the out of whack scorecard?
I'll pull them up. I don't have them to hand, but there was definitely a scorecard that.
One card that was way out of line. I thought it was even. I was very, very disappointed with the way Shiraz fought, and it upset a lot of plans. As I understand it, the idea was Canelo, who has a four-fight deal with the Saudi Arabian Entertainment Authority, is supposed to fight William Skull this May, then Terence Crawford in September, and then Cinco de Mayo weekend in 2026. It's likely that he will fight the winner of Ben and Eubanks. And if everything went as planned, he would then have a big fight on Mexican Independence Day 2026 against Shiraz. And I would assume that Turkey, who's a big Shiraz fan, hope that, well, Canelo will be older by then, Shiraz will be better. And Shiraz just didn't fight well. Yeah, maybe his hand was broken. I don't know if it was or not. There are fighters who have fought with broken hands before. He did not look good. He looked intimidated. This was somebody who a lot of people, myself included, had been led to believe, wow, this guy is a beast. He is really good. He is the real thing. And he didn't fight like it against Adames. It was a step-up fight for both men. And Adames stepped up. Shiraz didn't. We'll see if he can regroup and come back stronger in the future.
Could you break down your eye on seeing the fight as a draw a little bit more, please, Thomas?
I don't have my scorecard
Sure.
in front of me now, but I'm just trying to think back in my mind as to how it unfolded. If I recall correctly, I gave the last two rounds to Shiraz. There were some rounds that were very, very hard to score in that fight. There were, again, I'm doing this from memory now, but I think that probably each guy clearly won 4 rounds, and there were 4 rounds up for grabs. Whatever it was, I had it even. I had Shiraz coming back at the end to win it. But this was the perfect setting for Shiraz. I mean, you expected the crowd to be rabidly on his side. It was dead quiet for most of the time. And Shiraz, I mean, you could say, well, Adames silenced the crowd, but no, Shiraz silenced the crowd. He just didn't do what was expected of him. Maybe he'll regroup, learn from this, and come back stronger. He says that he will. We'll see. He won't intimidate people as much as he did in the past, in the near future. I assume that they will give him a fairly soft touch or two to rebuild his confidence and his image, and then we'll see where he goes.
Wait to see where it goes. I think Frank mentioned as well too that the weight might have been an issue, having Shiraz ball down, considering his frame at middleweight and maybe a move to super middle. You touched a little bit on Shakur Stevenson, and I want to see him in a fight with a little bit more on the other side of the coin with respect to Josh Paddy, who stepped in at short notice as Floyd Schofield falled ill. What is that fight that you want to see before the end of the year, Thomas?
Well, okay. First, Josh Padley stepped in on short notice. If he had stepped in on long notice, it wouldn't have made any difference. I mean, he just wasn't going to be competitive with Shakur. I am not sold yet on Shakur. He is a very good boxer, but he has not fought any visitors of note. I would love to see him fight Gervonta Davis, who I believe is a very, very good elite fighter. And if Shakur wins that fight, then I'll say, yeah, he's the real thing.
In the wider context of this card, I believe the move was made to have the.
One more thought, and that is, although they say they won't fight, I'd like to see Shakur fight Keyshawn Davis. That would be a very interesting fight too.
In the wider context of the card, I believe over in the US, the fight was pitched at $24.99. Was that the case? And do you feel that's a right step in the right direction if boxing is going to step back into the mainstream big nights and big spotlights?
It might have been that, might, I'm not sure, whatever. Yeah, 9.99. One of boxing's biggest problems, and we have talked about this before, is that it takes the sport's spotlight events and cuts them off from the greatest number of viewing fans. You don't build a fan base that way. And I think the example we've talked about is Tiger Woods would not have become the enormous attraction that he did if you had to pay $79.99 to watch them in the Masters or US Open. So boxing has to find a way to get past this economic model. I would have liked to see Turki Al-Sheikh put some of his fights on network television. Basically give them away in the United States to the networks, and whatever ad revenue comes back, fine. DAZN continues to lose billions and billions of dollars. The Saudi investment, I believe the Saudis bought 10% of it, is helping keep the network alive now. And I would like to see him put some of these fights on network television. That's how you start to build a fan base again.
Is there anything further you'd like to touch on the card, either fights-wise or as a whole, before I move on to one final topic, Thomas?
No, just it was a very good card. I enjoyed it. We'll see what comes next.
So the last thing I just wanted to discuss is I believe we're going to be on the verge of a Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn media tour this week to promote the fight. One of the big talking points surrounding that fight is the implementation of a rehydration clause, the fight at middleweight, with Chris Eubank Jr. only being allowed to rehydrate to 170 on the fight night. What's your opinion on that rehydration clause being put in place on Eubank Jr.?
I don't have a problem with a rehydration clause being put in to make fights more competitive and to minimize the weight advantage one fighter would have over another. Look, the whole issue of weight has gotten way out of whack in boxing. Welterweights aren't welterweights anymore. They're middleweights or super middleweights. You know, in the old days, fighters weighed in on the day of a fight. And the real reason they moved to day before weigh-ins wasn't to safeguard the health and safety of the fighter. It was because if you had the weigh-in before the fight, you got your pictures and your stories for news communication in those days. And it became, the weigh-in for big fights became an event in themselves. So, you know, if you had same-day weigh-ins for fights, fighters would start to move up in weight. Fine, they'd be fighting people who had the same issues that they did. But do I like seeing a fight where one, and I'm not talking about heavyweights now, but at the middleweight or, you know, super welterweight level where one fighter comes in 15 pounds heavier than the other? No, that doesn't strike me as fair.
How much do you perceive that issue surrounding fighters boiling down to weights within boxing? Because I look at the UFC and I see UFC fighters struggling and shaking when they approach scales and just about making it onto scales and then gingerly walking back, which I don't see as much as a visible problem in boxing, but I absolutely can see it being one there. Is it as comparable as it seems to be in the UFC with fighters boiling down to weights they shouldn't be at?
Yeah, boiling down to make weight is obviously a health issue. Some fighters, both boxing and MMA, have to boil down too much to make weight. It's not healthy. It's just not good for the body, or the brain, you know, particularly when you're going to go out, get punched hard a couple hours later or a day later.
All right then, Thomas, those are all my questions. It's been another enjoyable conversation. Thank you so much for speaking to Seconds Out, and I look forward to our next one.
Very good. Have a good day.